Life's greatest lessons don't always come in grand moments. They come in missed turns, kind gestures, quiet warnings, and unexpected dreams. These stories will remind you that sometimes, what feels like a mistake is actually fate leading you exactly where you're meant to be. Life has a strange way of teaching us lessons, sometimes through unexpected detours, sometimes through the kindness of strangers, and sometimes through the quiet wisdom we almost miss. Each of these stories holds a truth that will linger in your heart, reminding you that even the smallest moments can change everything.
The wrong bus that took her to the right place.
Helen, Lena, as her loved ones called her, had been waiting for this moment for years. That morning, her mother had called her. "Sweetheart, you've got this." Her mother's voice was warm and reassuring. "Remember what Dad always said?" Lena smiled, remembering her father's words. "The universe has its own timeline." "Exactly. And look at you now, all those late nights and extra courses. You're ready, sweetheart. I can't mess this up, Mom. This isn't just any job." "I know, baby. I know." Lena was right. This wasn't just any interview. It was the interview, the job she had dreamed about since college. The one she had sacrificed sleep, weekends, and a social life for. The one rejection after rejection had led her to. She had rehearsed her answers 100 times, triple-checked her resume, and picked out the perfect outfit. Everything was set. She grabbed her bag, rushed out the door, and hopped onto the first bus that pulled up, barely looking at the route number. 5 minutes later, her stomach dropped. Wrong bus. Her breath caught as she checked the time on her phone. Even if she got off at the next stop and sprinted, there was no way she'd make it in time. Her chest tightened. All that effort and all that preparation for nothing. Frustration burned behind her eyes. She gripped the strap of her bag, her pulse hammering with disappointment. Then she heard it. A gasp. Sharp, ragged, desperate. Lena turned, and her breath hitched. An elderly man in the seat across from her was clutching his chest, his face drained of color. His lips were pale, and his body was slumped against the seat. "Someone help!" A woman screamed from the back of the bus. "Please, does anyone know what to do?" The bus driver's voice crackled over the intercom. "Is everything all right back there?" "He's having a heart attack," someone shouted. A teenage boy fumbled with his phone. "I am calling 911, but..." "How far is the nearest hospital?" another passenger asked. 10 minutes, the driver called back. "Maybe more with traffic." "He doesn't have 10 minutes, Lena whispered to herself. The other passengers froze, eyes wide, some fumbling for their phones. But no one moved. Lena did. She wasn't a doctor, but she had learned CPR years ago. She had never needed to use it before. Now, her body reacted before her mind even caught up. She dropped to her knees beside the older man. "Sir, can you hear me?" No response. His pulse was weak. His breaths were uneven. Her hands trembled, but she focused. She pressed her palms against his chest. Counted. Compressed. Breathed. "Come on," she whispered, sweat beating at her temple. "Stay with me." The bus driver had pulled over. People were watching. Someone was calling 911. But all Lena could think about was keeping this man alive. Minutes stretched into eternity. Then a sharp inhale. His chest rose. His eyelids fluttered. A weak, shaky breath slipped past his lips. His eyes met hers, and in the faintest whisper he said, "Thank you." "Just breathe," Lena said softly, her heart still racing. "The ambulance is coming." She sat back, breathless. Relief surged through her, followed by something bigger than disappointment or frustration. The ambulance arrived, and the man was taken away. But Lena had missed her interview for sure. 2 months later, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. "Hello," a warm voice responded. "Is this Lena?" "Yes, who's this?" "You may not know me, but I do. My father told me what you did for him on the bus," he said. "When he woke up in the hospital, he kept talking about the young woman who saved his life. The paramedics said you stayed until help arrived. He never forgot your face." Lena's breath caught. The old man she had saved, his son was the hiring manager. She had been the top candidate for the job, but never showed up. And yet, in spite of that missed interview, she was getting a second chance. A slow, Incredulous smile spread across her face. "Yes," she said, gripping the phone tighter. "I'm definitely still looking." "You know," the man said, his voice softening, "my father told me something interesting. He said that morning he'd taken the wrong bus. He usually takes the 7:15, but that day something made him take the 7:31 instead. He recently spotted your name and photo on the list of job candidates who applied for this position, and that's how I found out about you." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "The universe has its own timeline," she whispered. "What was that?" "Nothing," she said, smiling. "Just something my father used to say." Lena was right. Sometimes, the wrong bus doesn't take you away from where you're supposed to be. Sometimes, it takes you exactly where you belong.
The coffee that warmed more than hands.
Every morning, without fail, Paul stepped into the cafe at exactly 7:45 a.m. It was a small place, tucked between office buildings, always buzzing with the usual morning crowd. Rushing workers grabbing their caffeine fix, students buried in their laptops, and baristas moving at lightning speed to keep up with orders. The cafe's bell chimed as the door opened, bringing with it the crisp morning air. "Morning, Paul," called Sarah, the cafe owner, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. "The usual. Is there anything else?" Paul smiled, already reaching for his wallet. Sarah shook her head fondly. "You know, in 10 years of running this place, you're the only customer who's never tried anything new. Why change what works?" He placed his exact change on the counter. "Besides, some routines are worth keeping." "Some secrets too," Sarah murmured, glancing toward the window with knowing eyes. Unlike the others, Paul never seemed in a hurry. He ordered the same thing every day. "Small coffee, no sugar," he'd say with a polite smile, handing over exact change. Then he'd settle into his usual spot by the window, sip slowly, and watch the world move around him. At first, no one really noticed him. Just another regular, blending into the routine of the morning rush. But there was one thing that stood out. Before leaving, Paul always asked for a refill. "Refill, please," he'd say, holding up his cup. At first, no one questioned it. Maybe he just liked a second cup for later. Maybe he had a long commute. Maybe it was just a habit. But it happened every single morning. Order, drink, refill, leave. One morning, Mia, the barista who had worked there long enough to memorize every regular's order and predict which customers wanted extra foam before they even asked, finally let her curiosity get the best of her. As she handed him the fresh cup, she tilted her head. "Why do you always get a refill if you're heading out?" Paul smiled, tucking his wallet away. "Because it's not for me." Mia blinked. "Then who's it for?" He nodded toward the street. "That old man over there." She followed his gaze and saw him, a frail man in a worn-out coat, standing at the corner. He wasn't panhandling. He wasn't asking for anything. He just stood there, hands tucked into his sleeves, and his eyes drifting toward the cafe every so often, as if he used to belong there but didn't anymore. Paul took his coffee, stepped outside, and casually placed the cup on an empty wooden chair near the entrance. Then, without a word, he walked away. Mia frowned, watching as the old man hesitated, his eyes darting left and right. Then, with careful hands, he reached for the cup, lifted it, and held it close, letting the warmth sink into his fingers before taking a sip. Mia felt something in her chest tighten. The next morning, when Paul came in, she watched him closely. "You're later than usual," she said. "Train delay," Paul sighed. "Hope I didn't miss him." "He's still there," she assured him. "Always is." "Good." Paul nodded. "You know, he never misses a day. Rain or shine." "Like someone else I know," Mia smiled. Paul chuckled. Maybe some routines are contagious. Sure enough, after finishing his coffee, he asked for his refill, took the cup outside, and set it on the same chair. But this time, something was different. Instead of just an empty spot, there was a small folded note sitting beside the cup. Paul picked it up, his expression unreadable as he unfolded the paper. Mia leaned over the counter, watching intently. For simple words, written in shaky handwriting. "Kindness still exists. Thank you." Paul stared at it for a moment, then smiled, a small smile that carried more warmth than the coffee in his hands. Without a word, He slipped the note into his pocket and walked out. Mia exhaled, a warmth spreading through her chest. The next day, before Paul could even ask, she handed him the refill with a knowing smile. "On the house," she said. Paul raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "More than sure," she nodded, then hesitated. "You know, we could." "Could what?" "Set aside a cup for him. Inside, where it's warm." Paul shook his head gently. "Sometimes dignity needs distance, Mia. Some gifts are better given quietly." She understood then. It wasn't just about the coffee. It was about letting someone keep their pride while showing them they weren't forgotten. Absolutely. Some people say big gestures change the world. But sometimes it's the small ones, the ones no one notices, that truly make a difference.
The warning she almost ignored.
Emily had walked this route home 100 times before. Same cracked sidewalks. Same bakery on the corner, the scent of warm bread filling the air. Same shortcut through the alley when she was in a hurry. Working late again. Marco, the baker, called out as she passed. "You know how it is." Emily smiled tiredly. "Another day, another deadline. One day you'll stop to smell the bread, yes." "One day," she promised, already checking her phone for the time. "Life moves too fast," he shook his head. "Sometimes we need to slow down to see what's important." She nodded absently, barely registering his words. There was always tomorrow to slow down, right? She moved on autopilot most evenings, barely noticing the people around her. But she always noticed her, the old blind woman. She sat at the same corner every day, her wrinkled hands resting on her lap and her milky white eyes staring into nothing. She never begged, never called out, and never even turned her head as the city moved around her. She was just there, like a quiet fixture of the street. Emily had never spoken to her, never even thought about it. Until that night. It had been a long day. Her boss had thrown last-minute work on her desk, which meant she had missed the early train. Now, she was rushing to get home before exhaustion completely took over. She checked the time on her phone. If she hurried, she could make it to the crosswalk before the light changed. Her pace quickened. The signal flashed walk. Then, just as she stepped forward, a hand closed lightly around her arm. Emily turned sharply, startled. It was the blind woman. Her grip was light but firm, her cloudy eyes staring past Emily's shoulder. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Be careful today." Emily blinked. "What?" The woman's face remained unreadable. "Just wait. I don't understand." Emily frowned. "Do I know you?" "No," the woman replied softly. "But I know the sound of rushing feet. I know the weight of time pressing down. And I know when something isn't right. Look, I really need to." "One moment." The woman's voice grew urgent. "That's all I ask. One moment of patience." Emily's pulse quickened. Something about the way she said it made her stomach twist. She glanced at the traffic light. It was still green, and people were crossing. She shook her head. "I have to go." She stepped forward, and in that very second, a car blew through the intersection. Fast. Too fast. The gust of wind from the speeding vehicle slapped against her skin. Tires screeched. Someone on the sidewalk screamed. "Oh my God!" a woman shouted. "Did anyone get the plate number?" "They were going at least 60, a man exclaimed, phone in hand. "Someone could have died." Another voice trembled. Emily stood frozen, Marco's words echoing in her mind. Sometimes we need to slow down. The car never slowed down, never even tapped the brakes. It had run the red light at full speed. Emily stumbled back onto the sidewalk, heart pounding. Her breath came in quick, shallow gasps as she processed what had just happened. She turned back to the old woman, her pulse hammering in her ears. But the woman was gone. Emily's head snapped left, then right. The sidewalk was still crowded, people whispering about the reckless driver, shaking their heads and scrolling on their phones. But the blind woman was nowhere in sight. A chill ran through Emily's spine. Had she imagined it? No. She had felt her grip, heard her voice. Her hands were still shaking as she pressed them against her chest, trying to calm her racing heart. If she had stepped out a second earlier, she wouldn't be standing there. Her legs felt weak as she finally forced herself to move, crossing the street with careful, measured steps. But something had changed. She wasn't just walking home anymore. She was listening, watching, noticing. That night, as she lay in bed, the ceiling above her blurred in the darkness. Emily replayed the moment over and over. She reached for her phone, dialing a familiar number. "Mom!" Her voice cracked slightly. "Emily, is everything okay?" "Yeah, I wanted to hear your voice. And maybe we could have lunch tomorrow." "But don't you usually work through lunch?" Emily smiled softly. Some things are more important than rushing. Emily had almost ignored the warning and had almost dismissed it as nonsense. But sometimes, wisdom comes from the most unexpected places. And sometimes, a whisper is all it takes to save a life. She would never ignore her instincts again.
The boy who reached for the moon.
Little Jake had always been fascinated by the moon. Every night, he'd lie in bed, staring out his window, watching it glow like a silver lantern in the sky. It looked so close, so reachable, as if all he had to do was stretch his hand far enough and he could grasp it. "Mom," he called one night, his face pressed against the window glass. "Why does the moon follow us everywhere?" His mother smiled, sitting on the edge of his bed. "Because it's watching over us, sweetheart." "But I want to touch it," Jake insisted. "It looks so close." "Some things that look close can be very far away," she said softly. "But that doesn't make them any less beautiful." Jake frowned. "I still want to try." "Grandpa," he asked one evening as they sat on the porch together, "do you think I can touch the moon?" His grandfather chuckled, his weathered hands folding over his cane. "Then start climbing." Jake's eyes widened. "I can reach it." "You know," his grandfather leaned forward, eyes twinkling, "when I was your age, I wanted to touch the clouds." "Did you reach them?" His grandfather simply smiled, looking up at the night sky. "If you climb high enough, who knows what you might find?" Jake took those words to heart. The next morning, he got to work. He gathered every ladder he could find, his father's old wooden one from the garage, the small metal one from the shed, and even a wobbly stool from the kitchen. He stacked them carefully, step by step, determined to build his way to the sky. "Jake, honey!" His mother watched nervously from the kitchen window. "Please be careful." "I will," he called back. "I just need it a little higher." "What are you doing?" Tommy, his next-door neighbor, peered over the fence. "I'm going to touch the moon." "That's impossible," Tommy scoffed. "Nobody can touch the moon. Grandpa says anything's possible if you climb high enough." Every night, he'd climb as high as he dared, stretching his little fingers toward the glowing orb above. But no matter how high he climbed, the moon stayed just out of reach. "Just a little higher," he would whisper to himself, dragging over more chairs, more boxes, and anything that gave him another inch. Days turned into weeks. His tower grew taller. His determination never wavered. But the moon never got closer. One evening, after another failed attempt, Jake sighed heavily and lay down on the cool grass, defeated. His arms stretched out beside him as he stared up at the sky, frustration bubbling inside him. His grandfather came and sat beside him, his knees creaking as he lowered himself onto the porch steps. "Tired?" he asked with a knowing smile. Jake nodded, exhaling sharply. "No matter how high I climb, I can't reach it." "You know what I see?" his grandfather asked gently. "What?" "I see a boy who didn't give up, who built something amazing, who tried what others wouldn't dare." "But I failed," Jake whispered. "Did you?" "Look above you, Jake." "What do you see?" "Just the sky." "Just the sky," his grandfather chuckled. "Oh, my boy, there's no such thing as just the sky." "What do you mean?" His grandfather didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back, gazing up at the vast sky. "Look up, Jake." Jake obeyed, expecting to feel the same disappointment all over again. But then, something changed. For the first time, instead of just focusing on the moon, he noticed something else. The stars. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. They stretched endlessly in every direction, twinkling like tiny lanterns across the dark canvas of the sky. "Grandpa!" Jake sat up suddenly. "What's that bright one there?" "That's Polaris, the North Star. And see that cluster? That's the Big Dipper." "There are so many!" Jake breathed. "How did I never see them before?" Sometimes we focus so hard on one thing, we miss all the wonders around us. His eyes widened. How had he never noticed them before? His grandfather chuckled softly. You may not have touched the moon, but now you see the stars. Something clicked in Jake's heart. He had been so focused on one impossible goal that he had ignored the beauty, wonder, and endless possibilities all around him. Maybe, just maybe, the journey itself was the real adventure, not just the destination. Years later, as an adult, Jake would still think about that night. He never touched the moon, but he became an astronomer, spending his life exploring the very stars he had once overlooked. On the day he received his doctorate, his grandfather was there, older but eyes still twinkling. Remember that tower you built? His grandfather asked. How could I forget? Jake laughed. I was so determined. You still are, his grandfather smiled. Just in a different way. You knew, didn't you? That I'd never reach it. I knew you'd reach something better, understanding. He was right. Because sometimes, the dreams we chase don't lead where we expect. But they always take us further than standing still. Life has a way of teaching us in whispers, detours, and unexpected moments. Sometimes, we miss what's right in front of us because we're too focused on what we think we should have. Other times, we feel lost, only to realize we were on the right path all along. Each of these stories reminds us of something simple yet profound.
The wrong path might not be wrong at all. A small gesture can ripple further than we know. A quiet voice can be the difference between danger and safety. And sometimes the dreams we chase are only part of the journey. We just have to be willing to see the bigger picture.
Because in the end, life isn't just about where we're going. It's about what we learn along the way.